struggling father finds a half-frozen bobcat on the side of the road, and saving it sets off a chain of events he never saw coming. What looks like a simple act of compassion pulls him and his daughter into something far darker. Because this animal isn't just another creature of the wild, it's evidence in a conspiracy powerful men are desperate to keep hidden. When the fight for survival turns into a fight for truth, the stakes become life or death. Who can he trust when every answer leads to more danger? And when protecting his daughter means going up against forces larger than himself, how far will he go before everything shatters? Before we start, take a moment to comment your name or city. It's my way of remembering that behind each play is a real heartbeat. The Montana morning bit deep with its December chill, the kind of cold that turned breath into ghostly wisps and made metal sting at the slightest touch. Caleb Harlow's old pickup truck rumbled down the empty back road, its heater working overtime against the frost creeping across the windshield. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel as his mind wandered to June, his 12-year-old daughter, probably still curled up in her warm bed at home. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, painting the sky in muted grays and pale blues. Snow-laden pines lined the road like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with yesterday's snowfall. Caleb had learned to appreciate these quiet morning drives to work, even if they reminded him of how much had changed since Sarah's death 3 years ago. His repair shop wouldn't open for another hour, but early starts had become his routine. June needed her lunch pack, and he liked to get the shop's heater running before his first customer arrived. These simple rhythms kept their fragile world turning, one day at a time. The truck's headlights swept across the shoulder of the road, catching something unusual in their beam. At first, Caleb thought it was just another shadow thrown by the uneven snow. But something about the movement made him ease off the accelerator. There, dragging itself through the powder, was a small form that didn't belong in this frozen landscape. Caleb's foot instinctively pressed the brake. The truck slowed, and his eyes widened as he made out the distinctive tufted ears and spotted coat of a bobcat kitten. The animal was painfully thin, its movements desperate and weak. As he watched, it lifted its head toward his truck, amber eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and something else, a will to live. That struck him right in the chest. Hell, Caleb muttered, already knowing he was about to do something foolish. He pulled the truck onto the shoulder, leaving the engine running. The bobcat hadn't moved far, its small body trembling violently in the morning air. Frost clung to its fur, and its paws seemed almost frozen to the ground. Every bit of common sense told him to drive on. Wild animals were unpredictable, dangerous, even when small and injured. Sarah had taught June enough about wildlife safety for some of it to stick with him too. But those eyes, they reminded him of June when she was sick with fever last winter. That same desperate need for help. Caleb shrugged off his heavy work jacket, the cold immediately biting through his flannel shirt. He approached slowly, speaking in low, gentle tones like he'd heard Sarah do with injured animals she encountered during her ranger work. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, that was hard-hammered in his chest. "I'm not going to hurt you." The bobcat kitten watched him approach, too weak to run or fight. Up close, Caleb could see it was barely more than half-grown, its condition even worse than he'd first thought. Its breaths came in shallow pants, creating tiny clouds in the frigid air. With movements that felt both careful and urgent, Caleb wrapped his jacket around the small predator. He expected resistance, teeth, claws, anything but the complete surrender. As the animal practically collapsed into the warmth of the fabric, it weighed almost nothing in his arms, a fact that worried him more than any potential danger. "You're coming with me," he said firmly, cradling the bundle against his chest. The bobcat made no sound, but he could feel its rapid heartbeat through the jacket. Back in the truck's cab, Caleb placed the wrapped bobcat on the passenger seat, cranking the heater up even higher. The nearest vet clinic was in town, a good 20 minutes away even without the icy roads. He checked his watch. Dr. Wilson usually opened early. He'd have to call June from the road, let her know he'd be late to the shop. As he drove, Caleb kept glancing at his unusual passenger. The bobcat's eyes had closed, but he could see its sides rising and falling with each breath. Something about its presence filled the cab with a strange sort of tension, like he'd crossed some invisible line between the ordered world of his daily life and something wilder, more uncertain. A memory surfaced, Sarah kneeling beside a wounded deer, her ranger's uniform dusty from the trail, telling him how every creature deserved a chance when fate dealt them a hard hand. She would have stopped for this bobcat without a second thought. Maybe that's why he had. The truck's tires crunched through fresh snow as Caleb increased his speed. Careful, but urgent. Morning light was spreading across the landscape now, revealing the stark beauty of the frozen world around them. The bobcat stirred slightly, making a soft sound somewhere between a whimper and a growl. Hang in there, Caleb said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. We're almost there. The roads into town were starting to show signs of early morning traffic. A few cars here and there, mostly other early risers heading to work. The vet clinic's small building came into view, its windows still dark. Caleb pulled into the empty parking lot, his headlights illuminating the closed sign on the door. He reached for his phone, ready to call the emergency number posted beside the entrance when he noticed movement inside. Dr. Wilson was already there, moving between the kennels with a coffee cup in hand. Relief flooded through Caleb as he gathered the jack-a-trap Bobcat, now worryingly still in his arms. The morning air bit even harder as he hurried toward the clinic's door, each step crunching in the fresh snow. The wild creature in his arms represented something he couldn't quite name, a chance to help, to save something fragile from the crushing weight of circumstance. Maybe it was foolish, maybe even dangerous, but Caleb knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't have done anything else. This moment of choice, standing in the pre-dawn light with a wild animal trusted to his care, felt bigger than just a simple act of mercy. It felt like the beginning of something, though what that something might be, Caleb couldn't yet know. All he knew was that he had to try, had to give this small fighter a chance at survival. He reached the clinic's door and knocked, watching Dr. Wilson turn in surprise at the sound. The Bobcat stirred against his chest, its amber eyes opening, briefly to meet his. In that moment, Caleb felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he was committed now to this creature's survival, to this choice he'd made on a frozen Montana morning. The lock clicked as Dr. Wilson approached the door, and Caleb shifted his precious burden carefully in his arms. The day ahead might bring challenges he couldn't foresee, but right now, in this moment, he knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth the risk, worth breaking the usual rules for. Sarah had taught him that, and now, holding this wild creature that had somehow found its way into his path, he understood it in a whole new way. The small veterinary clinic sat quiet and dark when Caleb's truck pulled into the empty parking lot. His headlights illuminated the Car Veterinary Services sign, its green letters barely visible through a dusting of snow. The Bobcat kitten lay still in his jacket on the passenger seat, its breathing shallow but steady. Caleb leaned on his horn, holding it down until a light flickered on inside the clinic. Dr. Lillian Carr appeared at the door moments later, her tall frame wrapped in a hastily thrown-on coat over what looked like pajamas. Her expression shifted from annoyed to alert when she saw Caleb rushing from his truck, with the bundle in his arms. Caleb Harlow. What on earth? She stopped mid-sentence. As the jacket moved slightly, found it on the road, Caleb explained, his breath coming out in white puffs, nearly frozen. I know it's wild, but I couldn't just leave it. Lillian held the door open, her sharp eyes taking in the situation. Bring it in, quickly. The clinic's waiting room smelled of antiseptic and pet food. Lillian led them straight to the examination room, flicking on bright fluorescent lights that made them both squint. The metal examination table gleamed cold and sterile. Careful now, Lillian warned as Caleb gently laid his jacket bundle on the table. Even half frozen, a wild cat can be dangerous. With practiced movements, she pulled on thick protective gloves and began to slowly unwrap the jacket. The Bobcat kitten barely stirred, its eyes half closed and glazed. Up close under the bright lights, its condition looked even worse, ribs showing through matted fur, patches of frostbite on its ears and paws. Poor thing severely undernourished. Lillian murmured, her professional demeanor softening as she examined the animal, probably why it couldn't handle the cold. But that's odd. She leaned in closer, fingers carefully parting the fur around its neck. What is it? Caleb asked, stepping closer despite himself. There's a collar, hidden under the fur. Lillian's brow furrowed as she revealed a thin black band around the Bobcat's neck. And it has a tag. Caleb watched as she carefully turned the small metal disc, reading the engraved text. Her expression darkened. Read Summit Holdings. She read aloud, her voice tight with sudden tension. Property number 473. The development company? Caleb frowned. What would they be doing with a wild bobcat? Marking it, apparently. Lillian's movements became more purposeful as she continued examining the animal. This isn't natural, Caleb. Wild predators don't get tagged like this unless they're part of a scientific study. And Red Summit isn't a research organization. They're developers. The Bobcat stirred weakly on the table, its amber eyes opening, to fix on Caleb. There was something in that gaze that made his chest tighten, a desperate trust that seemed out of place in a wild animal. It needs immediate treatment, Lillian said, already moving to gather supplies, fluids, warming measures, antibiotics for the frostbite. But Caleb, she paused, looking at him seriously. Finding this animal in this condition with this tag, it raises questions I'm not sure we want to ask. You think something illegal is going on? Caleb watched as she inserted and feline into the docile cat. I think. Lillian chose her words carefully while working. That Red Summit has been pushing hard to develop several wilderness areas around here. They've been claiming predator attacks on livestock as one of their justifications for clearing the land. Finding one of their tagged predators half dead in the snow. That's not a coincidence. The implications settled heavy in the room. Caleb thought of his late wife, Sarah, who'd worked as a park ranger and had often spoken about the delicate balance between development and preservation. She would have wanted to know the truth. What should we do? He asked quietly. Lillian wrapped a warming blanket around the bobcat, her movements gentle despite her obvious concern. First, we save this little one's life. Then, well, I'd advise caution. Red Summit has powerful friends, and if they're doing what I suspect, planning tagged predators to create artificial conflicts, they won't appreciate anyone asking questions. The bobcat had relaxed slightly under the warming blanket, its eyes still fixed on Caleb. He couldn't shake the feeling that saving this animal had tied him to something larger, something that reached beyond this small clinic and into darker corners he wasn't sure he was ready to explore. We'll need to document everything. Lillian continued, reaching for her camera. The tag, the condition it was found in, the location, just in case. She paused in her work, looking at Caleb with concern. You should know, being involved in this could be complicated. Red Summit isn't known for taking opposition lightly. Caleb nodded slowly, remembering the desperate way the bobcat had dragged itself toward his truck, as if choosing him specifically as its savior. I understand, but I can't just ignore this. No. Lillian agreed softly, checking the bobcat's vital signs. I suppose neither of us can. They worked in focused silence after that, Lillian treating the frostbite and malnutrition while Caleb assisted as needed. The morning light grew stronger outside the clinic windows, but inside, time seemed suspended in the quiet space between discovery and decision. The bobcat kitten, evidence of something suspicious and possibly sinister, dozed fitfully under their care, unaware of the larger implications its rescue might bring. The sharp rap of knuckles on the clinic's front door made both Caleb and Lillian jump. Through the frosted glass, the dark silhouettes loomed, broad-shouldered and imposing against the morning light. We're not open yet, Lillian called out, her hand automatically moving to rest protectively near the sleeping bobcat. This is urgent business, Dr. Carr. The voice was deep and authoritative. We're here about the bobcat that was brought in this morning. Caleb felt his stomach clench. The men couldn't have known about the bobcat unless they'd been watching or following him. He exchanged a worried glance with Lillian. Mr. Harlow, the voice continued, sending an icy chill down Caleb's spine. We know you're in there. It would be best if you opened the door now. Lillian's face hardened. She moved swiftly to the examination table, gathering supplies into a carrier while whispering. There's a back entrance through the storage room. Get ready. The pounding on the door grew more insistent. Dr. Carr, this is private property you're interfering with. Open up, or we'll be forced to take other measures. Just a moment. Lillian called out, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she prepared a sedative. I'm with a patient. She quickly administered the shot to the drowsy bobcat, then nodded to Caleb. Help me get her into the carrier. Quickly. The men outside began rattling the door handle. Through the glass, Caleb could see one of them reaching inside his jacket. His heart pounded as he helped Lillian carefully transfer the limp bobcat into the carrier. The law requires you to surrender tagged wildlife to authorized personnel. The voice had lost all pretense of politeness. Open this door now. The law also requires proper documentation and identification, Lillian shouted back, zipping up. The carrier, which I notice you haven't offered. A loud crack made them both flinch. The sound of something heavy hitting the door's frame. Caleb grabbed the carrier, while Lillian snatched up her medical bag and a thick folder of documents. This way, she hissed, leading him through the examination room to a narrow hallway. Behind them, the pounding grew more violent, accompanied by the splintering of wood. They hurried through the storage room, past shelves stacked with medical supplies and bags of feed. Lillian fumbled with a ring of keys, her breathing quick but controlled as she located the right one. The back door opened onto a small parking area behind the clinic, surrounded by pine trees heavy with snow. Lillian's truck sat there, covered in a fresh dusting of white. Get in, she ordered, already starting around to the driver's side. We need to. The sound of breaking glass from inside the clinic cut her off. Caleb clutched the carrier closer, feeling the bobcat's warmth through the fabric as he yanked open the passenger door and climbed in. Lillian had the engine running before he'd even closed his door. She threw the truck into reverse just as the storage room door burst open, the two men emerging into the snowy lot. "Stop right there," one of them shouted, reaching into his jacket again. Lillian didn't hesitate. She slammed the accelerator, the truck's tires spinning in the snow before finding purchase. They shot backward, then forward, swinging onto the narrow access road that ran behind the clinic. "Hold on," she muttered, taking the first turn fast enough to make the truck slide. Caleb braced himself against the dashboard with one hand, while keeping the carrier steady with the other dot in the rearview mirror. He could see a black SUV pulling out behind them, its engine roaring as it gave chase. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. "Red Summit's enforcement team," Lillian replied grimly, taking another turn that sent snow spraying from their tires. "They handle their wildlife management program. I've had run-ins with them before, but never like this." The SUV was gaining on them, its dark bulk filling the rearview mirror. Inside the carrier, the Bobcat stirred weakly, letting out a small sound of distress. "There's a Forest Service road up ahead," Lillian said, her knuckles wide on the steering wheel. "It's not maintained in winter, but take it," Caleb said immediately. His years of mechanical work told him their truck, with its higher clearance and winter tires, would handle the rough terrain better than the SUV. Lillian nodded and yanked the wheel hard to the right. They bounced onto a narrow track between the trees, snow flying up around them. The truck's engine whined as they climbed, the path growing steeper and more treacherous. In the mirror, the SUV hesitated at the turnoff. Then, with the roar of its engine, it followed them onto the forest road. "They're persistent," Lillian muttered, navigating around a fallen branch. "But they don't know these roads like I do. I've treated half the ranchers up here." The chase continued through the snowy forest, their truck weaving between trees while the SUV struggled to keep up. Each bump and turn jostled them, but Caleb kept the carrier steady, speaking softly to the Bobcat when it mewed in confusion. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they reached a fork in the road. Without slowing, Lillian took the left path, which seemed to disappear into a dense stand of pines. "There's an old ranger station about a mile ahead," she explained, her eyes fixed on the treacherous path. Weakened, her words cut off as the truck suddenly lurched, the engine sputtering. Lillian's face went pale as she pumped the gas pedal, but the vehicle continued to slow. No, she muttered, guiding the dying truck to the side of the road. "This can't be happening." "What's wrong?" Caleb asked, though years of mechanical experience had already given him a good guess. "Fuel line must have frozen," Lillian confirmed his suspicion, smacking the steering wheel in frustration. "The temperature dropped so fast last night." Behind them, the sound of the SUV's engine grew louder. Caleb looked at the carrier, then at the dense forest around them. A decision crystallized in his mind. "How far did you say that ranger station was?" "About a mile." Lillian caught his meaning immediately. Through those trees would be faster than following the road, but in the snow, better than waiting here. Caleb was already opening his door, the carrier held securely against his chest. "Come on." They climbed out into knee-deep snow, the cold immediately biting through their clothes. Lillian grabbed her medical bag and the documents, then led the way into the trees. Behind them, the SUV's engine grew louder, then stopped. Car doors slammed. "Harlow," a voice bellowed through the trees. "That animal is dangerous. You're putting yourself at risk." "Keep moving," Lillian whispered, breaking a path through the snow. "They won't follow us far on foot. Not in these conditions." Caleb followed close behind her, his arms aching from carrying the carrier, but his grip never loosening. Inside, the Bobcat remained quiet, perhaps sensing the need for stealth. The sound of pursuit gradually faded behind them, replaced by the soft hush of falling snow and their own labored breathing. The forest pressed close around them, branches heavy with white, creating a sense of isolation that was both comforting and unsettling. As they pushed forward through the deepening snow, Caleb's mind raced. He had gone from simply helping an injured animal to fleeing armed men in the space of a morning. Whatever was going on with Red Summit and their tag predators, it was clearly more sinister than simple development disputes. He thought of his daughter June, probably just waking up at home, and his chest tightened. He had promised her a stable, safe life after her mother died. Now he had stumbled into something that threatened to upend everything. But looking down at the carrier, remembering the desperate trust in the Bobcat's eyes when he'd found it on the road, he knew he couldn't have chosen differently. Something wrong was happening in these mountains. Something that had left the wild creature tagged and starving in the snow. And now, for better or worse, he was part of it. They continued their difficult journey through the snow-laden forest, each step taking them further from safety and deeper into uncertainty. The morning sun filtered weakly through the pine branches above, casting mottled shadows on the pristine snow before them, marking their path into whatever danger lay ahead. The crunch of snow under tires echoed through the empty logging trail as Lillian carefully maneuvered her truck deeper into the forest. Caleb sat rigid in the passenger seat, one hand resting protectively on the carrier where the sedated Bobcat lay. His mind raced with the morning's events, trying to make sense of how a simple act of kindness had turned into what felt like a scene from a thriller movie. After 20 minutes of tense driving, Lillian pulled off onto a narrow side path, hidden by thick pine branches. The truck came to rest in a small clearing, sheltered from view of the main trail. "We should be safe here for now," Lillian said, killing the engine. "I use this spot sometimes when I need to treat wildlife away from the clinic." She turned to face Caleb, her expression grave. "Now, what exactly have we stumbled into?" Caleb ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "Those men knew my name. They knew about the Bobcat within hours of me finding it." "That's not normal." "No, it's not," Lillian agreed. She reached for her bag and pulled out the folder she'd grabbed from the clinic. "And this isn't the first time I've had run-ins with Red Summit Holdings." She spread several documents across the dashboard. "Look at these reports from the past 6 months. There's been a spike in predator sightings and livestock attacks across the county. But something about the patterns never felt right to me." Caleb leaned forward, studying the papers. Maps marked with red dots showed clusters of reported attacks, all centered around certain ranches. "These are all properties bordering Red Summit Land Holdings," he noted. "Exactly." Lillian pulled out her phone and opened a local news article. "And look at this. 3 ranches have sold to Red Summit in the past 4 months alone, all after experiencing unprecedented wildlife problems." The pieces started falling into place in Caleb's mind. "They're using the predators to drive people off their land," he said slowly, "creating a threat to force sales. And this little one was meant to be part of it." Lillian gestured to the carrier. "The tag proves they had her in captivity. My guess is they were planning to plant her body somewhere as evidence of aggressive predators in the area." Caleb's phone buzzed, a text from his daughter June asking about dinner plans. His heart clenched as he realized the danger he might be putting her in. But he couldn't ignore what they were uncovering. "I know some people who might be able to help," he said, typing a quick reply to June. "Old-timers who've been watching Red Summit's moves for years." Over the next few hours, they made careful phone calls from the safety of the clearing. Caleb reached out to Tom Webster, a retired ranger who'd worked with his late wife. Tom connected them with other concerned locals, a wildlife photographer who documented suspicious patterns of animal behavior, a former county clerk who'd noticed irregularities in land sale records. "It's bigger than we thought," Lillian said as she added notes to their growing pile of evidence. "They've been planning this for years, creating artificial conflicts between predators and ranchers, manipulating public opinion." The Bobcat stirred in its carrier, letting out a soft mewl. Caleb checked on her. The sedative was wearing off, but she seemed calm, those piercing amber eyes watching him with what almost looked like trust. "She wasn't supposed to survive," he said quietly. "Just like those ranchers weren't supposed to be able to keep their land." Lillian touched his arm gently. "We have to protect her. She's living proof of what they're doing." "My daughter," Caleb started, voicing his deepest fear. "I know," Lillian said. "But think about what happens if we don't stop this. How many more families will lose their homes? How many more animals will they sacrifice for their scheme?" The weight of the decision pressed down on Caleb. He thought of his wife, her dedication to protecting both the land and its people. What would she have done? As if reading his thoughts, Lillian added, "Your wife believed in standing up for what's right, even when it was hard. June has that same strength in her. I've seen it." Caleb nodded slowly. "We'll need to be smart about this. Careful, document everything." They spent the next hour organizing their evidence and making plans. The Bobcat would stay at a wildlife sanctuary Lillian trusted, safe from Red Summit's reach. They would gather more proof, build a case that couldn't be ignored. It won't be easy, Lillian warned as they prepared to leave their hiding spot. Red Summit has money and influence. They'll fight back hard. "I know," Caleb said, feeling a familiar determination rising in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when he first spotted the Bobcat in the snow. But some things are worth fighting for. The sun was setting as they carefully made their way back toward town, taking back roads to avoid being spotted. The Bobcat dozed in her carrier, no longer the half-frozen creature Caleb had found that morning, but a symbol of something larger, the wild spirit that Red Summit sought to tame and control for their own profit. In his mind, Caleb began forming a plan to protect both his daughter and their cause. He would need to be strategic, gathering allies and evidence while staying under Red Summit's radar. The path ahead was dangerous, but he could feel in his bones that it was the right one. The snow had started falling again, coating the world in fresh white. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a reminder that the wild heart of Montana still beats strong, despite those who would try to silence it for their own gain. The moon cast long shadows across the empty Montana backroads as Caleb's truck wound through the hills. Lillian sat beside him, reviewing their gathered evidence by flashlight. The past few days had been a blur of careful investigation and mounting tension. "These land records are damning," Lillian said, shuffling through papers. 3 more ranches sold under market value after mysterious predator sightings. Caleb nodded, his eyes scanning the dark road ahead. The headlights carved through the night, illuminating patches of black ice that glittered like broken glass. Something felt off. The roads were too quiet, even for this time of night. A flash of metal in his rearview mirror caught his attention. Headlights appeared, growing larger at an alarming rate. "We've got company," he said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Lillian twisted in her seat to look back. "To trucks. They're gaining fast." The first impact came without warning, a solid ram to their rear bumper. That sent them fishtailing on the icy road. Caleb fought for control, his years of experience handling vehicles in winter conditions kicking. And automatically, "Hold on," he shouted as he corrected the skid. But their pursuers weren't done. The truck split up, one on either side of them now. In the harsh glare of their high beams, Caleb caught glimpses of familiar faces, Reddle's men. From the clinic. "This wasn't a chance encounter. They're trying to box us in," Lillian said, her voice steady despite the fear Caleb could hear underneath. Up ahead, the road curved sharply toward the old Miller Creek Bridge, a narrow crossing over a deep ravine. In summer, it was treacherous enough. In winter, with ice coating its metal surface, it was a death trap. One of the trucks swerved closer, scraping their passenger's side with a screech of metal. On metal, Lillian braced herself against the dashboard as Caleb struggled to maintain their line. "We can't let them force us onto that bridge," he said through gritted teeth. His mind raced, evaluating options with the same methodical precision he used to diagnose engines. The bridge loomed closer. The trucks pressed in tighter, leaving them no room to maneuver. Caleb could see the drop-off now, a black void beyond the bridge's guardrails. That's when he noticed it, the distinctive whine of a poorly maintained timing belt, coming from the truck on their left. His mechanics picked up the weakness instantly, and a desperate plan formed. "When I say now," he told Lillian, "brace yourself against the door and hold on tight." She nodded, trust evident in her eyes despite the chaos around them. Caleb let their speed drop slightly, allowing the truck on their left to edge ahead. The timing had to be perfect. He watched the bridge approach, counting down in his head. Now, he yanked the wheel hard left, clipping the rear quarter panel of the truck beside them. The impact was precise, right where the engine mount would be weakest on that particular model. The effect was instantaneous. The truck's timing belt snapped with a sharp crack. Its engine seized, sending it into an uncontrollable spin. The second truck swerved to avoid a collision, giving Caleb the opening he needed. He floored the accelerator, shooting through the gap and onto the bridge. Behind them, the disabled truck slammed into the guardrail with a thunderous crash. The other truck skidded to a halt, its driver forced to stop or risk the same fate. Caleb didn't slow down until they were miles away, his heart hammering in his chest. When he finally pulled over in a secluded turnout, his hands were shaking on the wheel. Lillian let out a long breath. "That was. How did you know what to hit?" "Heard the belt going bad," he said simply. Knew where it would be vulnerable. The reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. They really tried to kill us. They would have succeeded if not for your skills. Lillian turned to face him fully. "Caleb, this can't go on. Reddle's escalating because he's scared. Scared of what we know, what we can prove." He stared out at the dark road, seeing again how close they'd come to disaster. "I have to think about June. If anything happened to her, running won't protect her," Lillian said gently. "As long as Reddle's out there, none of us are safe. We need to expose him, all of it. The wildlife manipulation, the forced sales, tonight's attempt on our lives." She was right. He'd been trying to play it safe, gathering evidence while staying under the radar. But Reddle had just shown how far he was willing to go to keep his secrets. "We'll need help," he said finally. "People we can trust. And we'll have to move fast, before he tries something like this again." Lillian pulled out her phone. "I know some journalists who've been investigating Red Summit for years. They've never had enough proof to go public, but with what we've gathered, make the calls," Caleb said. The image of the bridge, the black void beyond it, strengthened his resolve. "We finished this now. They spent the next hour in that turnout, making plans and arrangements. The near-fatal ambush had changed everything. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to bring Rettel's entire operation into the light. As they finally pulled back onto the road, taking a different route home, Caleb thought about the Bobcat kitten that had started all this. Like them, it had been meant to disappear, quietly into the night. Instead, it had survived, becoming the first crack in Rettel's careful facade. Now that crack would spread, exposing the rot beneath. Caleb's practical skills, the same ones that had saved their lives tonight, would become tools in a different kind of fight, a fight for justice, for the truth, for everything his wife had believed in. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in days, their path was clear. The old cabin nestled deep in the woods had been their secret place, a refuge where Sarah, Caleb's late wife, would sometimes retreat after long days patrolling the park. Now, 5 years after her death, Caleb found himself seeking shelter in its musty confines once again. The Bobcat kitten, which they'd named Kathy, prowled restlessly near the wood stove where Lillian had made her a nest of old blankets. "We should be safe here for now," Caleb said, brushing dust from the window ledge. "Nobody knows about this place except family." His voice caught on the word family. The cabin held too many memories. Sarah's hiking boots still sat by the door, where she'd left them that final spring. Her coffee mug still hung from its hook above the sink. He'd never had the heart to change anything. Lillian worked quietly at the table, sorting through their evidence against Rettel. "We need something concrete," she said. "Something that ties all these pieces together." Caleb nodded absently, his mind drifting to Sarah. She would have known what to do. As a park ranger, she'd had an uncanny ability to spot patterns, to see connections others missed. That thought stopped him cold. "Her reports," he whispered. "What?" Sarah kept detailed records of everything she saw on patrol. She was meticulous about it. Caleb crossed to the far corner of the cabin, where a heavy trunk sat beneath years of dust. She mentioned something about suspicious activity near the park boundaries just before. He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he knelt and lifted the trunk's creaking lid. The scent of old paper and leather wafted up, along with something else, Sarah's favorite pine-scented hand lotion. His throat tightened. Inside lay neat stacks of ranger logs, field notebooks, and manila folders. Caleb's hands trembled as he lifted them out one by one. Each was labeled with Sarah's precise handwriting, dates, locations, incident types. "Look at this," Lillian said, picking up a folder marked Suspicious Activity, Red Summit Holdings. She was tracking them years ago. Caleb spread the contents across the floor. Maps marked with red pins. Photographs of tire tracks and disturbed wildlife areas. Detailed notes about vehicles coming and going at odd hours. But it was a small notebook, tucked into the folder's back pocket, that made his blood run cold. March 15, he read aloud, "Observed our SH vehicles near restricted breeding grounds again. Third time this week. Driver matches description of MR, same man from land acquisition meeting. Something bigger happening here. Need to investigate further. MR Marcus Rettel." The entries continued, growing more urgent. March 20. Found tagged wildlife far from normal ranges. Signs of deliberate relocation. This connects to the property sales. Must gather more evidence. March 23. They're watching me now. No, I'm onto something. Must be careful. The final entry was dated March 25th, the day before Sarah's accident. Meeting with Forest Service tomorrow. Bringing full documentation of wildlife manipulation scheme. Ours men followed me today. Don't trust official channels. Left backup files in. The entry ended there. Caleb sat back, his world tilting on its axis. The accident, a brake failure on a mountain road, had never sat right with him. But he'd buried his doubts along with his wife, focusing instead on raising their daughter alone. She knew, he whispered. She discovered what they were doing, and they killed her for it. Lillian touched his arm gently. Caleb, but rage was already replacing shock. 5 years of grief crystallized into something harder, sharper. He looked at the half-grown Bobcat watching him from across the room. Another innocent caught in Rettel's schemes. How many others had there been? How many more would there be? Or would there be? This was never just about the Bobcat, he said, his voice rough. Sarah was trying to expose the same thing we've stumbled into. Rettel's been at this for years, using wildlife to manipulate land. Sales, destroying anyone who gets in his way. He gathered Sarah's reports with reverent care, then stood. She died trying to protect this land and these animals. She died trying to stop him. What are you going to do? Lillian asked quietly. Caleb looked down at the final notebook entry, at Sarah's handwriting cut off mid-sentence. I'm going to finish what she started. I'm going to bring him down, not just for us, not just for the bobcat, but for her. The kitten padded over and brushed against his legs, its amber eyes seeming to hold his gaze. In that moment, Caleb understood why he hadn't been able to leave it to die in the snow. Some part of him had recognized this connection, this thread, leading back to Sarah and the truth she died protecting. We'll need help, Lillian said, already gathering the documents. This is bigger than just us now. I know exactly where to start, Caleb replied, picking up Sarah's last notebook. She said she left backup files somewhere, and I think I know where to look. His grief had become purpose, his fear transformed to determination. Sarah had died seeking justice. Now, years later, he would see her fight through to its end. The bobcat kitten settled at his feet, a living reminder of all that was at stake. The wild things, the honest people, the truth itself. Caleb felt Sarah's presence in that moment, as real as the cabin around him. I hear you now, he whispered. I understand what you were trying to tell me, and I won't let you down. Outside, snow began to fall, covering their tracks, while inside the cabin, a widower's pain finally found its meaning. The truth had been waiting here all along, preserved in his wife's careful hand, waiting for the day when the right thread would lead him back to it. That thread had come in the form of a half-frozen bobcat, a creature that, like Sarah's memory, refused to be silenced. June, honey, we need to talk. Caleb sat down beside his daughter at their kitchen table. The morning sun cast long shadows through the frost-covered windows. What I'm about to tell you isn't easy, but you deserve to know the truth. June's eyes widened as Caleb explained everything. The bobcat, Rettle's schemes, and finally the devastating truth about her mother's death. Her small hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. Mom was trying to stop bad people. Yes, sweetheart. And now we have a chance to finish what she started. Caleb squeezed her hand. But it's dangerous. If you want, Dr. Carr can take you somewhere safe until... No. June's chin lifted. So much like her mother's. I want to help. Mom wouldn't run, and neither will I. Lillian, who had been quietly watching from across the room, stepped forward. We'll protect her. Caleb, all of us, together. Over the next few days, they worked methodically. Lillian used her veterinary connections to track down other suspicious wildlife incidents. June, tech-savvy beyond her years, helped them navigate old computer files Sarah had hidden away. Caleb's repair shop became their command center. Maps and documents spread across his workbench between jobs. Their first breakthrough came when Caleb repaired a truck belonging to one of Rettle's former employees. The man, grateful for Caleb's fair pricing, mentioned strange deliveries he'd made to remote locations, caged wildlife being moved under cover of darkness. Write it all down, Caleb urged, handing him paper. Every date, every location. They gathered more testimonies. A ranch hand who'd seen tagged predators released near farmland. A Forest Service intern who'd noticed missing wildlife reports. Each piece added to their growing evidence. Caleb's mechanical expertise proved invaluable during close calls. When Rettle's men tried to corner them at an abandoned ranger station, he hot-wired an old service vehicle for their escape. Another time, he disabled their pursuers' engines by scattering specially modified caltrops across a mountain road. Dad's like a superhero, June whispered to Lillian after one narrow escape. Her eyes shining with pride. The turning point came when they discovered a hidden cache of Sarah's backup files in an old ranger station. External hard drives containing years of surveillance photos, recorded conversations, and detailed documentation of Rettle's operation. This is it, Lillian breathed, examining the files. This is everything the federal authorities would need. Getting the evidence to the right people proved challenging. Rettle's influence ran deep in local law enforcement, but Lillian knew a federal wildlife agent she trusted, someone beyond Rettle's reach. They arranged the handoff carefully. June helped create a diversion at a local festival while Caleb and Lillian made the exchange. Hours later, they received confirmation. The evidence was safely in federal hands. That evening, watching June sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, Caleb felt something shift inside him. He was no longer the man who simply survived after Sarah's death. He had become someone who fought back for justice for his daughter, for the truth his wife had died protecting. We did it, Sarah, he whispered to the quiet room. We're going to finish what you started. The morning after sending the evidence, Caleb woke to silence. Too much silence. June's bedroom door stood open, the covers torn from her bed. A note lay on her pillow, typed in cold, precise letters, the logging camp. Midnight, come alone. Caleb's hands shook as he read the words over and over. His chest tightened until he could barely breathe. The room spun around him as memories of Sarah's death crashed through his mind. Not again. Please, not again. He stumbled to his truck, fumbling with his phone to call Lillian. Her voice came sharp with worry when he could barely form words. June. They took June. I'm coming right now, Lillian said. Don't do anything until I get there. 20 minutes later, they sat in Caleb's kitchen, the note between them. Caleb's face was ashen, his eyes hollow. I should have known. Should have protected her better. This isn't your fault, Lillian insisted, reaching across to grip his trembling hands. Riddle is the one who chose to target a child. But Caleb, listen to me. June needs you thinking clearly right now. She needs her father's strength. I can't lose her too, Caleb whispered. After Sarah, June is everything. Then use that. Lillian's voice grew fierce. Use that love, that need to protect her. It's your greatest strength, Caleb. It always has been. Something stirred in Caleb's eyes. A spark of the same determination that had driven him to save a freezing bobcat. On a winter morning, the logging camp, he said slowly. Riddle chose it because it's isolated. No witnesses. He's expecting you to come charging in blind with panic, Lillian added. That's what he wants. Caleb stood, pacing the kitchen as his mechanic's mind began working the problem. The camp has been abandoned for years. The old equipment, the layout. His eyes narrowed. I repaired machines there before it closed. I know every building, every access road. Knowledge is power, Lillian reminded him. And you're not alone in this fight. But Caleb shook his head. I have to go alone. If they see anyone else. He couldn't finish the sentence. Then we'll be your backup. Silent, unseen. But there if you need us. Lillian squeezed his arm. June is stronger than Riddle knows. She's your daughter, and Sarah's. That counts for something. Caleb touched the wedding ring he still wore. Thinking of Sarah's courage, of June's bright spirit, the paralyzing fear, began to transform into focused resolve. He would meet Riddle at the logging camp, but not as a broken man begging for mercy. He would go as a father fighting for his child, carrying the strength of both her parents' love. Midnight, he said, quietly. Time to end this. The old logging camp loomed like a graveyard of rust and shadows. Snow whirled through the midnight air as Caleb's truck crept along the access road, his headlights catching the skeletal frames of abandoned machinery. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady on the wheel. Every piece of equipment, every building held memories from his days working here. Memories that might keep June alive tonight. 3 trucks were already parked in the clearing, their tracks fresh in the snow. Caleb stepped out, the wind cutting through his jacket. In the back seat, Kathy the Bobcat stirred restlessly in her carrier. He hadn't planned to bring her, but something told him the wild creature belonged in this fight. That's far enough. Harlow. Riddle's voice carried across the yard. He stepped out from behind a derelict loader. Flanked by 2 men with rifles, June stood between them, her face brave despite her fear. Let her go, Caleb called out. You've got me here. That's what you wanted. Riddle smiled coldly. What I want is for troublemakers to learn their lesson. Your wife never did. Never did. The taunt about Sarah sent rage coursing through Caleb's veins, but he forced it down. Rage would get June killed. Instead, he took a careful step forward, noting how the snow had drifted against the old equipment. He knew these machines inside and out. You're finished anyway, Caleb said. The evidence is already with the feds. Evidence can disappear, Riddle sneered, just like people while they talked. Caleb had been inching toward the ancient log loader. Its hydraulic system had always been temperamental in the cold. One sharp blow in the right spot, he lunged suddenly, smashing the frozen hydraulic line with a piece of pipe he'd palmed from his pocket. The pressurized fluid burst free with a shriek, spraying one of Riddle's men in the face. In the chaos, Caleb kicked snow toward the other guard's eyes. June broke free, running toward her father. Behind them, an otherworldly screech split the air. Kathy had somehow worked the carrier latch loose. The Bobcat launched herself at the nearest guard, not attacking, but creating enough confusion for Caleb to grab June and pull her behind the loader. Stay down, he ordered, shielding her as gunshots rang out. But the shots were answered by new voices. Flashlights swept the yard. As federal agents emerged from the tree line, weapons drawn, Marcus Riddle, a commanding voice boomed. Federal agents, drop your weapons. Riddle's men surrendered quickly, but Riddle himself made a desperate break for his truck. He made it 3 steps before Kathy darted between his legs, sending him sprawling face first into the snow. When he looked up, he found himself staring into the barrels of federal rifles. June clung to Caleb, shaking but unhurt. Nearby, Kathy sat calmly grooming her paw, looking for all the world like she'd planned it this way. The wild creature that had started everything was there to see it end. Dad, June whispered, I knew you'd come. Caleb held his daughter close, watching as agents cuffed Riddle and read him his rights. Sarah's killer would finally face justice. The long nightmare was over. Spring sunlight filtered through the pine branches, warming the mountain air as Caleb's truck wound up the familiar Forest Service road. In the passenger seat, June held Kathy's carrier, speaking softly to the recovering Bobcat inside. The animal's frostbitten paws had healed well under Lillian's care, and today was the day they'd all been waiting for. "This was your mom's favorite spot," Caleb said, pulling into the small clearing that overlooked the valley. Sarah had spent countless hours here, watching over the wilderness she'd sworn to protect. Now, with Rettel behind bars and his criminal empire crumbling, her work would finally be honored. June stepped out, carrying Kathy's crate carefully. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Caleb's throat tightened as he remembered the past week's events. The federal raid on Red Summit Holdings, the evidence they'd uncovered of years of corruption, the long-awaited arrest of the man responsible for Sarah's death. Yeah, honey, she'd be real proud. The morning news had confirmed what they already knew. Rettel faced decades in prison. His scheme to terrorize ranchers off their land had backfired spectacularly thanks to one small Bobcat and the ordinary people who'd chosen to stand up to him. "Ready?" Caleb asked, kneeling beside the carrier. June nodded, her eyes bright with tears and triumph. Together, they opened the cage door. Kathy emerged cautiously, her amber eyes scanning the forest. The young Bobcat looked different now, stronger, fiercer, yet somehow still connected to them by the struggles they'd shared. "Go on," June whispered. "You're free now." Kathy took a few steps forward, then paused to look back at them. In that moment, Caleb saw everything they fought for, not just justice for Sarah, but the principles she'd lived by, standing up for what's right mattered, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Bobcat turned and bounded into the underbrush, disappearing like a ghost into the wild. June pressed against her father's side, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Dad?" she said softly. "I used to be scared all the time after Mom died. Scared you'd leave too. But now I'm not anymore." Caleb looked down at his daughter, seeing the strength that had always been there. "Why's that?" "Because you showed me how to be brave. Not just talking about it, but really doing it." She smiled up at him, like Mom did. Standing there in Sarah's forest, Caleb felt the weight of grief lifting from his shoulders. He was no longer the broken man who lost his wife, or even just the quiet mechanic everyone underestimated. He had become something more, someone who could face down giants and win, someone worthy of his daughter's admiration and his wife's memory. The morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces as they watched the forest where Kathy had vanished. Their future stretched before them, as wild and full of possibility as the wilderness itself. They were free now too, free to live, to love, and to carry on Sarah's legacy of protecting what matters most. If this story found you at the right moment, subscribe and stay close. Tomorrow's may be the reminder you didn't know you needed.